Hello, we are back working on lesson 922. Today we have a person named Grant who is running for the Ironman Triathlon, a 140-mile race that starts with a swim, continues with a biking portion, and ends with a run. The swimming portion is approximately 1.5% of the race. The biking portion covers about 80% of the race, and the running portion covers about 18.5% of the race. Back to percents or continue with percents again. Only this time we're looking at physical activity. Pretty cool. Our job today, our task is to help Grant determine the approximate length of each segment of the race. We need to make sure that we show our work. And our first question is, how can we figure out the distance of 10% of the race or 1%? I like to make a percent ruler. And to make my percent ruler, I start down here at 0%. And then I try to eyeball 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100%. Try to make those as even as I can. And if I go back up into our problem, it says up here that the total is 140 miles. To figure out the rest of my percent ruler, I always like to try to get back to 10%. So we're going to go down to 10%. And I know that if I do 100 divided by 10, I get 10%. And so I'm going to do the same thing to the top number. And that top number is 140. Oops. Divided by 10. And that gives me 14. Some of you notice that we're just moving that decimal point over to the left. And then I can go ahead up here and I can write 10% equals 14 miles. That was pretty easy. If I want to know what 1% is, well, I can take this 10% and I can divide it by 10. And my 1% is going to be down here. And if I divide 14 by 10, that's right, $1 or 1.4, 1 4/10. So for this answer, I'm going to put it over here so we can see it easier. 1 4/10 miles. So to get the biking part of the race, I can skip count by tens to fill in my percent ruler. 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. All right, 14 times 2 is 28, plus 14 more is 42, plus 14 more is 56, plus 14 more is 70, plus 14 more is 84, plus 14 more is 98, plus 14 more is going to be 112. And I know skip counting by 14s is not that easy, but it's kind of a great way to practice your times tables by thinking about that pattern. 80% of 140 then is 112 miles. And I'm going to take a look at this 18.5%. That looks like it might be kind of hard to do up there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a little bit of work over here. There's another way of doing this problem, and the word of is one of those wonderful clue words that sometimes we look for to help us to narrow down our strategies. And this of means that I multiply. Well, if I multiply 18 18.5% times 140. Let's see what happens. 18.5%. Uh-oh. Look at that. It automatically changed it into the decimal equivalent. Times 140 equals 25 and 9/10. So what happened here was I had my percent, and if I divide that by 100, that turns it into a decimal. And let's take a look at that. And I know my calculator is set up to do something kind of weird. It's programmed to do that conversion for us. But in the past, we've done the portion webs, and I want to show you what really makes this a lot easier. So if we take our percent, and we, instead of multiplying it by 100 to make it the percent, we're going to go backwards, and backwards of multiply is divide, and we divide by 100, and that is what we get. So really cool if you have a calculator that's programmed, but super important for you to know the strategy here, that 18.5% divided by 100 equals the decimal. And when I do the next part of this, that's the first step. The second part is to take that decimal and multiply it times 140, because that of was what we were going to remember as our clue to multiply. So I have the decimal in my calculator, multiply it times 140, and I get 25 and 9/10 miles. Now, we could go ahead and do the same strategy over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to put this one down here. We're going to do 1.5% divided by 100. Okay, so 1.5 divided by 100 is 0.015. The second part is to multiply times 100, 0 times 140, and we get 2. Now, some of you are probably wondering why you didn't just add these together, Mrs. Mennes-Coon, and then figure out what the answer was and then subtract it from 140. I could have done that too. All right, so we have another problem that we're going to try and look at quickly here. Bicycles, again, riding 82 miles on the first day. How long was the entire bike race? You know me and my percent ruler, so there's 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. We've got 0% here. And we know that 82 miles is 20% of the race. So here's where 20% is, and that's 82 miles. And one thing I can do, and I know I'm changing this up, but I know some of you are looking for patterns and shortcuts. 20 times what gives me 100? That is right. 20 times 5 gives me 100, so I'm going to multiply 82 times 5 and get 416. So that's how long the race is, 416 miles. And then we have, if the bicycles, going back up here to the top, if the bicycles rode 21% of the race on the second day, how many miles did they ride on the second day? Well, we can do that first thing, 21% divided by 100 And that's going to give us it's our first step. And then our second step is to take that decimal multiplied by 416. And we know that this is probably pretty accurate because our day 1 was 82 miles. Day 2 was a little bit more percentage, and it seems like that would be a good comparison. And what percent do they have left to ride? Well, if we have 20% plus 21%, that is 41%. And 100% subtract 41% gives me 59%. So how many more miles do they have left to ride? A couple different ways we can strategize this. I'm going to go ahead and change 59% to a decimal. Oops, 59 divided by 100. Step 1, step 2. Multiply this times 416 is our answer from the first problem of this set. Let's try that one more time. 416 times, okay, so we can say about 245, almost 245 and a half miles. All right, your next problem is going back to our work that we did in our lesson yesterday, but we're now going to be looking at raisins, and then there's a follow-up problem to that.